At 18, they packed my bags and told me I was on my own. It's no warning, no love, just silence and a slammed door. I struggled, I starved, I suffered. While they laughed at holidays and lived their lives, I built mine from scratch. And now, years later, they're the ones calling, asking for help. But the person they threw away doesn't exist anymore. I've moved on, and they're not part of the future I bled for. The last time I heard my mother's voice, it was a voicemail telling me not to show up for Christmas. No explanation, just let's not make things harder than they are. That was 8 years ago, so when her name lit up my phone on a random Tuesday afternoon, I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen until it went dark again. 5 minutes later, a text followed. We need to talk. It's urgent about the estate. Estate, not family, not me. The estate. I didn't reply, but something told me I'd hear from them again. Was right. That evening I got a second message, this time from my brother, Ethan, cold as always, professional, like I was a stranger. He was emailing from HR. There's a dispute over the trust. Your name came up. Can we meet? My name? The same one they'd scrubbed off every record, photo, and family group chat. The name they left off, wedding invitations, and Christmas cards. The name that, until this moment, had been dead to them. I said yes. It's not because I wanted to see them. I just wanted to know how bad it had gotten if ghosts like me were being summoned. We met in a glass-walled office downtown, neutral ground, to clean, to hold any truth. My mother was already seated, dressed in a beige blazer and rehearsed remorse. Ethan sat beside her with a legal pad, flipping pages like he was managing a board meeting. No hugs, no how have you been, just there's a technicality in the will. You're still listed on the historical trust as a conditional heir. We just need you to verify a timeline. It won't take long. I looked at them. 2 people who had cut me off like I was a typo in their legacy. For the first time in years, I smiled. Interesting. I said, you buried me, but I see I'm still useful on paper. I wasn't always the invisible one. There was a time when my mom used to tell people I was the quiet achiever. I got straight A's. I played cello. I never missed curfew. I was the kid who made things easy. Then came the trust fund. It was my grandmother's idea. Her way of setting up each grandchild with something for later. Education, business, a home. She set aside a portion for each of us. Mine was the first to be deposited. I remember her handwriting on the envelope. Avery's future. But after she passed, things changed. Subtle at first. My name stopped showing up on family emails. Vacation plans were made without me. My mother would glance past me during dinner conversations like I'd interrupted something. Ethan got louder, more involved. He called himself the executive, like it was a title he'd earned. One night, I came home from college for break and found my room stripped bare, furniture gone, art on the floor. My mother was already turning it into a yoga space. It's just easier this way, she said, as if I'd been slowly dissolving and she was merely responding to gravity. That same week, I saw a bank statement on the kitchen counter just long enough to notice my trust fund listed under a different name. When I asked about it, my father shut his laptop and said, "You're being dramatic." I wasn't. I started digging. Quietly. I printed every document I could access, screenshots, bank transfer logs, copies of notarized forms my grandmother had signed. I stored everything in a digital archive, time-stamped, encrypted. That was the beginning of the end. The night they cut me off wasn't a scene. No screaming, no suitcase on the porch. It was colder than that. Her father simply said, "This house doesn't carry dead weight." And just like that, my number was blocked. My college tuition payments vanished. The financial aid office flagged my records as unconfirmed funding. When I called to ask what happened, they said your family rescinded authorization. I sent emails. I tried writing letters. Nothing. Friends I'd grown up with stopped replying. One even told me, "Your mom said you had a breakdown. You ran away." I hadn't run. I'd been erased. Eventually, I stopped trying. I moved to a basement apartment in a different state. Took a job reviewing old municipal records for an archival firm. The work was slow, methodical, quiet. It suited me. I kept documenting everything. Not for revenge, just because it was the only thing I could control. Over time, I learned how to live without being seen, how to pay rent without a cosigner, how to rebuild credit from nothing, how to research case law in 4 different states. I didn't post, I didn't call, but I watched and I remembered. I remembered. That money doesn't vanish, just finds new owners. I remembered that signatures can be traced, that notarizations are public, that family history, no matter how buried, still leaves paper trails. They thought cutting me out meant I'd disappear. What they forgot is I knew how the legacy was built. And now, I know exactly where it cracks. After that meeting in the glass office, I didn't go home. I walked 3 blocks to a quiet cafe, opened my laptop, and started pulling up files I hadn't looked at in years. They wanted me to verify a timeline. First, I logged into the document vault, where I'd been saving records since the day I left home. Over 400 entries, labeled, dated, backed up twice. Every tuition withdrawal, every shift in the trust, every notarized letter from my grandmother. I hadn't collected them for this moment, but now I realized this moment had been collecting me. The next day I called in sick and drove to the county clerk's office. Historical trusts are legally unique. My grandmother's estate had been preserved. Under a preservation agreement, because the land contained architectural remnants tied to early regional settlement, that meant the inheritance was subject to oversight. Not just from the family, but from the Historical Preservation Foundation, a state-level nonprofit that monitored usage. I asked for the public filings on the Devo Trust, the name of the umbrella fund that held our family property. The clerk raised an eyebrow, asked for ID. I showed her my business card instead. Independent researcher, estate analyst. She handed me a USB drive with 32 documents. It didn't take long to find it. Scanned declaration dated 5 years ago titled, Statement of Heir Withdrawal. Avery Lynn, signed electronically stamped by a remote notary in Arizona. I hadn't been to Arizona. I hadn't withdrawn from anything. I zoomed in on the signature. It matched an old form I'd signed at 17 the summer before college when my father had me sign some updates to the family records. They'd copied that form. Changed the date, changed the title, swapped notaries, refiled it as if I'd vanished on my own. That was how they removed me from the estate. Quiet, legal, paper clean, but they'd made one mistake. I still had the original document. Metadata from that file showed a creation date, a file hash, and an access log that proved I hadn't signed anything after 2016. Even better. I'd uploaded that file to a cloud repository with blockchain verification, a service used by researchers to timestamp research trails. It wasn't just backed up, it was time-locked. They'd falsified a removal, but the record showed I was never legally gone. I felt the pressure rise behind my temples, part nausea, part rage. They didn't call me because they missed me. They didn't call because they had a change of heart. Called because the Preservation Foundation had reopened their file after a complaint flagged incomplete heir records. If one heir was removed fraudulently, the trust could be frozen. Worse, the land could revert to the state or be absorbed into the Foundation's educational program, an outcome my parents would never accept. They'd rather sell the estate than let it go public, and the only way to fix it, get me to confirm their lie. That's why they needed me to verify the timeline, not to clarify, not to correct, to cover. The irony, the same family that discarded me, silenced me, buried me, was now standing on ground they couldn't legally claim without me. They wanted a signature, a favor, a patch. What they didn't realize was that I didn't come back to participate. I came back to audit. The next time I saw them, I wasn't alone. I brought a laptop, a printed dossier, and a voice recorder. Up because I needed drama, but because I wanted them to know. Nothing about this was accidental. We met in a second-floor conference room at a different law office. Neutral ground again, but smaller with cheaper chairs. The kind of place where people settle disputes they don't want in court. Ethan was already there pacing. My mother sat near the window, fingers wrapped around a thermos of tea like it might soothe her conscience. She stood when I entered. I didn't. The family attorney began with the usual, We appreciate you being here, Avery. Let's start with the Devo situation, I interrupted. No. Let's start with this. I slid the printed declaration across the table. The fraudulent withdrawal. Then a second document, my original form from 2016. Clean, unsigned by any notary, uploaded and time-stamped 3 years before their version existed. I never withdrew, I said. And your notary was never authorized to verify for this trust. I've already confirmed with the foundation. Ethan scoffed. You're blowing this out of proportion. We had to restructure things. It wasn't personal. Forgery is personal, I said. I turned to the lawyer. Your office filed the updated version, correct? He nodded slowly. Based on documents provided by the estate. And if those documents were proven falsified, I asked calm. He didn't answer. I pulled out the final piece, a portable drive. I placed it in the middle of the table like a detonator. This contains the blockchain verification records, originals. Chain of custody, metadata, IP logs, and a voice message from 2018. My mother telling someone I was no longer part of the family. So we're simplifying the will. My mother flinched. Ethan muttered, that could be anyone. I looked at him. Do you really want to test me? Silence. Then I laid down the terms. You want the foundation off your back? You want to preserve the estate and avoid a fraud investigation? Fine, here's my offer. 1. Transfer the property into a public trust for displaced youth. 2. Publish a correction, naming me, reinstating my rights. 3. Never contact me again. Ethan's voice cracked. That's insane. You don't even want the land? I smiled. I want the truth, and I want it notarized. Didn't agree right away. My mother cried. Ethan called me ungrateful. But they didn't walk out because they knew if this went public, they wouldn't just lose the estate. They'd lose their reputations, their roles in every boardroom in Gala. They buried me for optics. Now optics would be the thing that forced them to dig me up. They didn't sign that day. People like them don't surrender without ceremony. They delay, they posture, they review. But 3 weeks later, the documents came through, signed, stamped, and witnessed. The estate was transferred to a public trust under the Historical Foundation's oversight. Its new designation, the Devo Home for Transitional Youth, a safe housing project for teens forced out of their homes. I got a copy of the updated trust charter in the mail unceremoniously in a plain brown envelope. No letter, no apology, just an institutional signature and the date it became official. I framed it. A few days later, a local paper ran a small piece. Private family estate quietly donated after internal dispute. No names, no drama, just a few lines about legacy, youth, and public stewardship. That was all I wanted. Not the spotlight, just the correction. Still, the family couldn't help themselves. Ethan sent me an email. Short, bitter, predictable. Congratulations. You burned down your own name to prove a point. I didn't reply. Mother left a voicemail. The tone wavered between guilt and strategy. She cried, mentioned the press, said she hoped I'd find peace. She ended with, despite everything, you'll always be my daughter. I listened to it once, then deleted it. Here's the thing about being erased. Once you realize you survived without them, you stop needing them to see you. The final formality was their public correction. One paragraph posted to the Foundation's newsletter. A clerical error previously misrepresented heir status. We regret the oversight and confirm Avery Lynn's legal role as original beneficiary. Her contribution to the estate's redirection is acknowledged with deep appreciation. It wasn't personal. It wasn't heartfelt. It was better. It was permanent. That weekend I drove upstate. There was no real reason. Just a need to breathe someplace with fewer names attached to the air. I stopped at a small cemetery on the edge of town. My grandmother's name was carved into a modest stone surrounded by wild flowers and gravel. I hadn't been there since the funeral. I sat beside her marker. Not for long. Just long enough to say it out loud. I didn't keep the land, but I kept your terms. I placed a folded note beside the stone. Inside it were the 3 original documents, her trust conditions, my notarized form, and the letter they tried to replace. Then I stood. I didn't cry. Some endings don't need tears. They just need silence. When I got home, I opened a new folder. On my laptop, titled it Closure, filed in it. I saved everything. Email logs, voice recordings, property transfer deeds, and one final note I wrote to myself. They cut you out to protect their image. You answered with evidence, not revenge. That's the difference between legacy and exposure. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like the kind of clean that doesn't come from soap, but from being finally, irrevocably done. Some legacies end with funerals. Others end with new beginnings. The Devo estate opened as a transitional youth center for months after the paperwork cleared. The sign outside was simple: white wood, black serif font. It read the Lynn House, a place to begin again. Didn't ask for that name. The foundation director said it was fitting. You were the one who held the line, she told me. I didn't correct her. The first group of residents moved in that spring. 5 girls, all between 16 and 19. One had just aged out of foster care. Another had spent the past 2 winters couch surfing with a backpack and a GED prep book. None of them knew who I was. Not really, I liked it that way. I taught a legal literacy workshop there once a week. How to read a lease. How to challenge a denied housing application. How to notarize your own life before someone else rewrites it. One evening, as I was packing up my materials, a girl, maybe 17, sharp eyes, cracked nail polish, stayed behind. She asked, "What if your family doesn't want you?" I didn't answer right away, and I said, "Then you build a life so solid they can't touch it." She nodded like she'd already begun. The house grew full in small, quiet ways. Books stacked in windowsills. Socks drying on radiators. Inside jokes taped to the fridge. The kind of belonging that doesn't ask for permission. Back at home, I kept my world clean, quiet, unlisted. Number? No forwarding address. I donated my grandmother's remaining personal items to the Sense reading room, her fountain pen, her annotated dictionary, the set of note cards she used to write me birthday riddles on. One night, I sat in the living room of the Lynn House as the girls played music from a cracked Bluetooth speaker. They were laughing, loud, chaotic, real. That was the moment I realized I hadn't just escaped a family. I had founded something better. Not a mirror of what I lost, but a correction. Not a table with my name carved into it, but a table long enough for anyone who'd been told they didn't belong. Later that month, I got one more letter. Handwritten, no return address, but I knew the slant of the script. My mother, she wrote that she missed me, that she wanted to meet, that she hoped maybe we could try again. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, just clarity. I wasn't holding the past hostage. I'd simply stopped inviting it in. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, opened the staff cabinet, and pulled out a new binder. I labeled it The Real Family Tree. Inside, I placed a sheet with one question printed at the top. Who helped you survive? Each resident would get to fill one branch. No last names, no legal ties, just truth. That night I wrote the first entry, named Lucia, my high school librarian. What she did gave me the key to the back office when I had nowhere else to go. What? She said. You're not a burden. You're just early. The tree grew slowly like all things that matter. And this time, no one got cut off the page. They didn't just cut her out. They rewrote the story like she was never there. But here at Reddit Reveal, we don't chase forgiveness. We tell the stories of those who return, not to be accepted, but to reclaim the truth that was stolen. If you've ever been erased, rewritten, or silenced, tell us in the comments. Your story deserves to be heard. There's a kind of pain you don't talk about, the pain of being left behind by the very people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. At 18, I didn't just lose my family. I lost safety. I lost trust. I lost the belief that someone would be there if I fell. They told me I was a burden, that I was too different, too difficult, too much. So they cut me off like a bad decision, eased me from birthdays, holidays, even group photos. I slept on couches. I skipped meals. I've worked jobs most people wouldn't dare to touch just to survive, but I also learned how to budget down to my last coin. I learned how to carry my own weight. I learned how to show up every day, even when I felt invisible. And most importantly, I learned who I really was without the noise of their judgment. It wasn't fast, it wasn't glamorous, but slowly, I started to climb. I built my own version of success, one sacrifice, one sleepless night at a time. The further I got, the quieter their laughter became, till one day, the silence broke. Not with an apology, but with a request. They needed help. The same people who once called me worthless were now in need of the very strength they said I'd never have. But something had changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. Had done the hard work not just in business or life, but within myself. I had forgiven, but I hadn't forgotten. So I listened. I heard their words. I let them speak. And when they finished, I told them the truth. I wished them peace, but I couldn't give them a seat at a table they abandoned before it was ever built. I didn't owe them the success they never believed in. I didn't owe them the love they refused to give. I owed myself the freedom to live without the weight of their absence, and that's exactly what I chose. Today, I look around at the life I created, one full of meaning, of real connection, of earned joy, and I know that everything I've become came from the very moment they turned away. Their rejection was my release. Their silence gave me space to hear my own voice, and their absence made room for the people who truly saw me. So if you've ever been cut off, cast out, or counted out, don't chase their approval. Chase your purpose. Build anyway. Rise anyway. And when they come knocking, you'll realize you were never missing a family. You were becoming your own.